Welcome to another episode of OTA on the Air. My guest today is Andrew Huffman with Governmental Policy Group, who is the lobbying firm that is employed by the Ohio Trucking Association. We're going to talk today about the highway bill. So Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
Well, the governor just signed the highway bill, which went through both the House and the Senate. And obviously the Ohio Trucking Association and Governmental Policy Group watch this one, and we're lockstep with the legislature on working through this piece. So we got a lot of good things that I believe happened. But I guess, Andrew, give us like a high level overview of what the bill did, what sort of money is in there, and where it's going to.
Yeah, Tom. House Bill 74. This is the $8 billion transportation budget. Funds really our transportation infrastructure over the next 2 years. Fortunately, this transportation budget was a little bit smoother than the last transportation budget. That one included tax increases on fuel and it hit diesel pretty hard. So this was a little bit smoother process. The governor introduced it in February. The House made some tweaks to it, and fortunately, the Trucking Association, we were able to make some positive changes in both the House and Senate, and the governor signed it. And kind of in a unique situation, most budgets go to a conference committee where members of the House and Senate have to work out the differences between the two versions of the bill. And this was such a smooth process, they avoided the conference committee. And this is my 10th budget, I believe, and I'm sorry, budget, 10 years, and never have they avoided a conference committee. So it was kind of nice to see that.
Well, and for our viewers, just kind of a quick reminder that last session, they increased the diesel fuel tax by 19 cents and gasoline tax by 10.5 cents. And interestingly enough, with COVID and the quarantines, that the gasoline tax basically fell off the deep end because no one was driving anywhere. But then diesel continued to generate some revenue, which I believe is really kind of why the issue of funding did not really come up in this particular bill. And it seemed like the fund had ample amounts of funding in it, I guess. Would that be your take as well?
Yeah, and really the only funding debate that we saw was the Department of Public Safety, which does not receive the fuel tax revenue. They're funded differently, and so they came to the legislature with they claimed a $133 million hole that they needed to fill. So to address that, the governor proposed registration fee increases to the tune of $10, and that would fill that $130 million hole. The legislature did not want to increase any sort of fees, so they were able to shift some things around and fund the Department of Public Safety through the General Revenue Fund. And they provided about $130 million in general revenue funds without any increases. So that was something that, we're not supporting any fee increases, certainly not on registration. So it was nice to see the legislature address this hole, fill this hole without any fee increases.
And that $130 million hole, that is just to get the highway patrol through this biennium. Is that correct?
I believe so. And so this is going to have to be something we need to address moving forward. They've looked at a number of ways to better fund the highway patrol, but for the last two transportation budgets, they've had to come to lawmakers asking for more money.
Well, yeah. So again, for our viewers, and Andrew, you'll have to get my dates straight, but about 10 years ago, they made this kind of imaginary divide, if you will, that all of the gas tax revenue. So constitutionally, any fees that are generated from highway funding sources have to go back onto the highways, which includes enforcement as well as road building. So the gas tax money goes to the Ohio Department of Transportation for road projects, whereas the registration fees actually go to the Department of Public Safety for on-highway enforcement piece. So that was why they went after the increase in the registration fees to do that. And the $10 increase gave them a pretty considerable amount of money to run off of. And I think that was probably one of the challenges was it almost seemed like the fee increase was such that they would be banking money over the course of the next 10 years to kind of ride that wave so they wouldn't have to come back for additional fee increases for another decade. And I think that's probably where it stumbled a little bit. But, that we were looking for justification as far as those expenses went to be able to get that.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the things that we got in the bill. I think one of the things that has been a long time goal of the Ohio Trucking Association and its members is to get a true permanent trailer plate. There was a provision in Ohio law, or is a provision in Ohio law, if you prepay for 8 years of fees in full, that you basically get a permanent trailer plate. But we wanted something that was actually competitive with some of our surrounding states that offer this, including Maine and Indiana. So talk a little bit about what we got when it came to permanent commercial trailer plate registrations.
Yeah, Tom, this is a couple of years in the making. We started working on this a while ago, how to make Ohio more competitive. And you hit the nail on the head. There's a lot that Ohio needs to do to make the process of registering trailers a bit more streamlined. And that still is a work in progress. More needs to be done. But the effort that we proposed in the transportation budget is just dollars and cents. How can we make Ohio's rates more competitive with surrounding states? And so what we did in Ohio, there's multiple layers of fees that go into these registration charges. There's a base fee, which is $25 per year. You have local taxes. There's a BMV fee, and then there's a deputy registrar fee. And we put most of our attention on this $25 base fee, which gets distributed to local governments. And you pay that, as you said, this 8-year option is essentially Ohio's permanent plate. And we said, instead of paying this $25 fee for 8 years to the tune of $200 for a permanent plate, why can't we just make it a one-time fee? And so we worked with legislators. We were able to get sign off on a $50 one-time base fee. So you're looking at a reduction of about $150, which was great to see, assuming there are no local taxes, which you can register your trailers where there are local taxes or no local taxes. This would bring us into about $143, which undercuts Maine by $1. So the numbers really worked out well for us. We had to work with local governments, and there was a compromise made in the House that said we are only going to implement this new fee structure on newly registered trailers in Ohio. So the thought behind this whole goal is that we will attract trailers to Ohio, which will bring more money into the state for our local governments, for our highway patrol, as well as for our deputy registrar. So a win all around if this works out. So only for new trailers coming into the state, newly registered trailers in Ohio. If it works, I think we can probably expand this in the next transportation budget as we continue to work on streamlining the process by which we register the trailers.
Yeah, and one thing to note in that is I guess there's kind of two things. One of which is that in order to make this an implementable piece, they had to push the implementation date from the normal July 1st implementation date to January 1st. So January 1st of 2022 will be the first availability of this. And as Andrew said, it is something that has to be done on only new registered trailers. So either you're bringing a trailer back from out of state, or you are purchasing a new trailer and putting it into service, that you can get that permanent trailer plate for $143, which is $1 less than the main 12-year plate. So, obviously something that we are going to be advocating very heavily for and advertising very heavily for, because in order for us to be able to garner this for the existing trailers we have in the state, we need to show the legislature that this is a viable option. So something we're going to pursue very heavily, as well as including providing those locales that do not have those taxes, so that you can get the lowest possible rate for that permanent plate. But definitely a big win, something I guess I've been pursuing my whole career. I was interestingly enough, when I tried to pitch this in North Dakota, it came down to a Senate vote that they went through and they brought back up again. And it got a tie vote, and the lieutenant governor was not in attendance that day. So it died because the tie-breaking vote wasn't there. So he and I still have that conversation today about that. So we finally got a win on permanent trailer plates, which is a great thing. So one of the other interesting pieces in there that we had to battle pretty hard for was the issue of what's called personal delivery devices, and these are basically little robots on basically wheelchair infrastructure that are designed to make quick deliveries from a retail location to a residence, and they operate on the sidewalk. So, from a drugstore or a grocery store to a residence that's nearby. I guess Andrew, talk to us a little bit about what the history of that is and the things that we got done on that.
Yeah. So the personal delivery device statute in law in Ohio has been around since about 2016. And these devices, they, like Tom said, they travel on the sidewalk. They can only go up to 10 miles per hour. And there is and kind of an arbitrary weight limit in the Ohio Revised Code. When the statute was created, it was $90. Just last session, that was increased, or $90, 90 pounds, I'm sorry. Just last session, that was increased to 200 pounds. But there's new devices that are out there that weigh more. And so in a way, we had an Ohio law that kind of arbitrarily picked who can come into the state and operate and who can't. And so we viewed that as really just a regulation blocking the development of this technology. And so we were able to work with lawmakers to increase this to 550 pounds, and hopefully that'll encourage more devices to come to Ohio. The development of this technology. I know in speaking to some legislators, Bowling Green State University, they're working with some partners to develop their own devices. So this is something that universities are looking into, private companies are looking at. I was on the phone this morning, Tom, with Drive Ohio, and they're very excited about this technology coming to the state. We did receive some pushback in the House, but we worked really hard to bring in local governments to make sure, hey, you can still control these devices in your cities. If you don't want them to operate, you still have that control. We brought in the insurance industry. So we brought in all the stakeholders that needed to be brought in. And I'm really glad we were able to get this change. And this is another one where I think it's going to be a work in progress. And speaking with Drive Ohio, we need to be able to allow these devices and this technology to operate to its full potential. And that's likely going to mean allowing them on the roadways, allowing them to go a little bit faster, and kind of remove some of these restrictions. So it's easier said than done. It'll be a work in progress, but this was a very, very big first step, really just to remove an arbitrary weight limit that limited the development of this technology.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. I think, this is a situation where we have an antiquated law that was brought in for one specific provider of these particular devices, and then you bandied it over the top because somebody else came out with one, then you bandied it over the top again because somebody else comes up with one that we're really going to have to take a look at this law in a comprehensive manner and rewrite it to make sense. But this is definitely a big win, so we can get these devices in place, that they can be piloted and tested out in certain environments, especially post-COVID or during COVID, to be able to have that hands-free delivery. I mean, basically, you're taking the human element out of it altogether. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely some things that need to be tweaked on that going forward. But the nice part about this is at least at this particular time, after this, within the next 5 years, we'll have some data that actually supports, this is the accident record of these things. This is how they operate. This is with the cities and the areas that they're operating in. This is some of that real world pieces that go forward. But definitely from keeping Ohio on the forefront of the development of transportation technology, this is just another step that really continues to keep us on that forefront. We talked a lot during our testimony about truck parking, and obviously that's one of the number one issues. We had Louis Pugh with OOIDA on our last episode. We talked about truck parking, and he referenced how it's one of the number one issues, if not the number one issues when it comes to drivers. So let's talk a little bit about some of the traction that we have gotten on truck parking in this particular piece of legislation.
Yeah, Tom, like you said, we've been working on this one for years. We've just been raising the issue, the parking shortage in Ohio, and This one was exciting because the governor, in his as introduced version of the bill, said, you know, ODOT will be able to close rest areas, but if they do close a rest area, they need to keep it open for commercial vehicle parking. So that was a good first step. We understand maintaining these rest areas, it's expensive. There's a cost associated with it, but keep it open for truck parking. So that was a good first step. The Senate built on that, and the Senate said, okay, you've been closing weigh stations throughout the state. You need to start opening up those weigh stations to allow for truck parking. And so the final version of the bill requires ODOT to open at least 2 weigh stations per year for the next, I believe, 3 years. So, you know, is that going to make a huge difference? Maybe not. But if you do this in the right areas, I think it will alleviate some of that congestion. And this is just one step. Tom, I know you've been involved with discussions about studying this a little bit more, identifying where in the state is this the biggest problem, and then ODOT will make some recommendations, and hopefully we can implement some of those changes here in the near future.
Yeah, one of the things that that ODOT is doing as part of their freight planning through the Federal Highway Administration is they're taking a very specific look at truck parking more and in a couple different fashions. One of which is, where do we have currently existing truck parking and the number of spots available, both public and private, as well as the next evolution of that is, where should there be truck parking? You know, that's one of the things that they have readily admitted is an issue here in Ohio, is we've got a lot of truck parking. It's just in the wrong spot. So, you know, we're taking a look at that. We're taking a look at, you know, where the public and public areas are and where the private areas are, and how we can support some private development of available truck parking, whether that be grants to truck stops to be able to purchase land, to be able to, you know, to develop further truck parking on that end. So there's a lot of things in play here. So it's nice that the legislature identified this as an issue. And I think that's one of the things that we said. And there was one thing in the previous highway bill that we tried to negotiate in, was with the 19-cent increase in diesel fuel, that we, you know, take a penny or two and put that in a specific fund, you know, specifically for truck parking. You know, and it was interesting that people, you know, a lot of the legislators really saw that as a future viable option. And that's what we've said is, hey, we're going to let ODOT do the work that they're doing through their process, but at some point we're going to have to come to you for some money. And this is an asphalt problem. This is not a digital sign problem. That we need truck parking, and it needs to be in the right spot. So yeah, definitely some very big and kind of creative wins that we had in that one.
Yeah, Tom, to build on that, I think, and you would agree, in all of our conversations, we never once had a legislator say, no, I don't think this is a problem. Every single legislator said, I see this every day on my way home. And so it's a visible problem. We even had a number of legislators say, please use me as your sponsor whenever you get those recommendations, because I want to sponsor the bill to fix this problem. So we have a lot of support for it. We just need to get the right solution to this problem. And hopefully we'll have ODOT's backing as well.
Yeah. So one of the things that a lot of folks don't understand is, it's not just what's in the bill that matters. It's what didn't get in the bill that sometimes plays itself out and really shows the worth of a good lobbying team. You know, one of the issues that we had advocated for in the prior session was the extension of the driver's license to up to 8 years, which did get passed and was supposed to be implemented on July 1st of this year in 2021. And we saw an amendment come out on the Senate side that removed that provision and kind of came out of nowhere. I guess talk a little bit about what was done with that and how it got resolved.
Yeah, Tom. Last session, there was legislation passed that we helped spearhead that would allow the renewal of a CDL every 8 years as opposed to every 4 years. There's a number of other states that allow the 8-year license renewal, so it's not unprecedented. We thought it was done. The bill was signed and it was ready to take effect. And then an amendment popped up in the Senate. I don't think there was any testimony or anything like that given on this provision, but apparently there were some concerns that people's appearance and vision can change over the course of 8 years. So there was language in the Senate bill that removed going back to the 4-year license renewal. We were able to reach out to the Senate president and the Speaker of the House and as they were making their negotiations, and we said, hey, you haven't even let this play out yet. Why don't we join these other states and allow the 8-year license renewal? And we were happy that legislative leaders removed that provision from the bill. So it remains as an 8-year license renewal. We'll be able to take advantage of that for the first time this year. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and the interesting part is sometimes the commercial driver's licenses and a lot of the stuff that we do as an industry gets lumped in with the passenger vehicle side of it. So whether it be training or on the case of the driver's license, we get lumped in with them. And I think that was probably the issue, because one thing that we made known very clear is that even though our drivers don't necessarily go into the DMV and look into their little vision thing, that our drivers are still required to have medical updates, at least as long as they can have is 2 years. So there is that checks and balances piece that's there for our drivers. So yeah, the only bad part about this is it doesn't take effect until July 1st, and I need to get mine renewed here next month. So unfortunately, I'm going to be a short termer until the next time I renew. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things. We talked a little bit what were not in the bill, but we had a pretty big push during the highway bill to really set ourselves up for the main operating budget. And for the folks listening to this, is the transportation bill has to be done and signed in most cases into law by the end of March. The last bill not being one of those that caught that, but because it takes effect on July 1st. Whereas the operating budget can be signed on June 30th and then take effect the next day. So the next bill that we're working on, or budget we're working on, is the main operating budget. And so one of the things we talked about very heavily in the transportation bill was workforce development issues, and talking about our scholarship and loan program for CDL training, as well as our tax credits for finishing schools. So Andrew, talk a little bit about that issue and where we're at on it.
Yeah. Again, two issues that we've been pushing for quite some time. And Tom, we did a really good job in the transportation budget of really putting everything on the table, saying, hey, these are the issues that are important to the trucking industry. We're going to bring them, put it all out there. Lawmakers, you figure out how you want to get these done, but they're important to the industry, and we're going to fight tooth and nail to get them done. Workforce training was no exception, and that kind of like the truck parking issue really started gaining momentum, and we had a number of legislators offer amendments to the transportation budget, which may not have been the best vehicle, but we had the support, and we were able to identify some folks that can really be our leaders on these issues. So we currently have two bills introduced. Like Tom said, the Cdl Scholarship Program. This is House Bill 129. It's a reintroduction from last session. It would create a $5 million commercial driver student aid program. That would be a half loan, half grant or scholarship program for those individuals attending CDL school. Really quite a bit of support for this. It's more important now than ever before, because in the last operating budget, so 2 years ago, there was a revolving loan program through the Treasurer's Office that 71% of applicants through this program went to CDL school. And unfortunately, the lawmakers stripped that program from its stripped funding from that program and used it to develop the Tech Cred program, which the Tech Cred program it's a fine program. It's used to get individuals credentials in various fields, but CDL training is excluded from the Tech Cred program. So they rated a fund in a program that we used to fund a program that CDL training is not eligible for. So it was kind of the worst of both worlds for us. And lawmakers this session have acknowledged that. They realize that there's really no programs out there for CDL training. And so we are gaining some momentum. The bill has received one hearing, and we are pushing this as an amendment to the main operating budget. That budget, it's a $75 billion bill, touches every facet of state government. We testified before the House Higher Ed Subcommittee on Finance, saying, hey, we have these workforce needs. We need to do something to get to address this workforce shortage in the industry. And the CDL Scholarship Program is certainly one of them. The chairman of that committee has been great to work with, and we have some great sponsors. So very excited about that. Hopefully we will get that into the House version of the bill. But everything costs money. Like I said, this is a $5 million per year program. $10 million in a $75 billion budget may not seem like a lot, but it is still quite a bit of money. So hopefully we will be able to get that done. We have quite a bit of support in the Senate as well. The other bill that you talked about, Tom, is the CDL training tax credit. This is for companies. So while the scholarship program is for individuals and attending CDL school, the tax credit is for companies that invest in their drivers to train their drivers. This bill was passed from the House last session, 91-1. We were cooking with gas, ready to get this thing done and through the Senate. And sure enough, COVID hit. And lawmakers really weren't anxious at that time to pass a $1.5 million tax credit bill when we didn't know what the state's finances were going to look like. So we are continuing to push on this bill. It would grant up to a $25,000 per company tax credit. It would be limited to the income tax to address some of the concerns that were raised by stakeholders. So really looking forward to addressing both of these issues, hopefully in the main operating budget. But just like the truck parking issue, this workforce development has been something that we've been asking for years, and it's really starting to gain momentum.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that we've been advocating for. We look at it as kind of a twofold thing. First of all, you have to get them through school as a driver, and then you have to onboard them correctly so they feel like they're invested in the industry and keep moving forward. And I think that's one of our biggest challenges is you've got folks who dive into the industry for a little while and then jump out, and we need to make sure that we train them properly and incentivize those companies to be able to provide that ongoing training for their drivers when they finish them and bring them into place. So I guess what else can we expect in that budget? It's a huge one. It touches, like you said, every facet of state government. I would imagine that one of the questions is going to come in is what do the tax collections look like post COVID or after the quarantine issue, and then where's the money coming from? How do they spend all this money without any of that revenue coming in? Like, where's that money coming from?
Yeah, Tom, we've been fortunate. The federal government obviously has been giving states quite a bit of help during the pandemic, and Ohio has really been saved by enhanced Medicaid payments that the federal government has helped cover through the pandemic, and that's saved us about $300 million per quarter. So we have this $75 billion budget that is balanced, and it's doing so without raising taxes. It's balanced without raising taxes and without dipping into the state's rainy day fund. So the money is there. Some other things that you may see in the budget, kind of like the transportation budget, this is a vanilla bill. There's really not a ton of controversial things in there. Usually these bills are about 4,000 pages long. This bill is only 2,000 pages long. So it is a straight funding bill. We're not seeing a lot of policy or anything like that in there. Now, one thing that you may see added, specifically the Senate has kind of focused on this, is the issue trying to bring solvency to our unemployment compensation system. Again, an issue that's been around since forever. I know the Trucking Association played such a huge role after the recession in the 2000s. It was our idea to use unclaimed funds to pay off the federal debt. Well, much like back then, we are now borrowing from the federal government, and businesses are going to have to pay that off at some point. So how can we make Ohio's fund solvent? It would have been a heck of a lot easier to do this when the economy was booming as opposed to now. But that is something that President Huffman in the Senate has said he really wants to address. We're fortunate in the Senate, he has Kurt Schuring, Senator Schuring, who really took the lead on this a number of years ago, understands unemployment comp very well, but that is something that needs to be addressed. They're also looking into unemployment fraud. This has been rampant with the pandemic. I know our company, we have 8 employees and 6 of them have received notices that someone's filed for unemployment compensation on their behalf, including myself. I'm apparently unemployed. So it's a huge issue that needs to be addressed. So it's really attacking the unemployment comp system on multiple fronts, making it solvent and then addressing the fraud issue as well. So hopefully they are able to address that. But again, that's another issue that's been around forever, and it's easier said, to fix it than actually implementing those changes.
Yeah, and I learned that very quickly when I came here in that the unemployment compensation system here in Ohio is set up for failure. The unfortunate part is they pay as we as employers pay our premiums based on a flat amount, and then the benefits are paid out on an escalating level. And anybody who can do a little actuarial science knows really pretty quick that ain't going to work. And at some point, you're going to run out of money if your benefits keep escalating, but your revenues don't. So that's definitely a something and a challenge that needs to be fixed. And I think that this is going to be that tragedy, if you will, that needs to be utilized to hopefully fix this for good for once. Yes. So the number of ideas I've pitched to them to fix it has been monumental, but we'll have to see how they go. We'd be kind of remiss if we did not also cover what we have dubbed our number one issue for the association. That's the issue of distracted driving as a primary offense. And the governor had put that in the transportation budget as part of that amendment package or that proposal package, and it got stripped out right away by the House. Let's talk a little bit about distracted driving and what you see or I guess how you see that unfolding as the legislature moves through its work.
Yeah, Tom, this was a standalone bill last session. You were part of the governor's press conference. We're fortunate that we have a governor that is 100% bought into this, and his administration is entirely on board. Unfortunately, the legislature has been a bit more hesitant, and it doesn't matter what stats you give to some lawmakers. Ohio's one of 4 states, I believe, Tom, that doesn't have a primary enforcement of some sort of texting and driving. The governor's plan was ambitious. It would have prohibited any use of handheld devices while driving and made that a primary offense. It also increased the penalties associated with those offenses. So it was an ambitious plan. The legislature quickly removed it from the transportation budget. They said they wanted to handle it as a standalone bill. There have been some great legislators identified as sponsors. I would imagine we're probably going to see a standalone bill introduced in the House here in the next couple weeks. But we still have some issues that need to be resolved. There's some legislators out there that say this will be abused by law enforcement. There's some legislators out there that say that this will lead to racial profiling. And these are not new issues. They've been raised in other states, and other states have found ways to address them or overcome them. So it's something that I think can be worked out. And we will likely have to tweak what's in the governor's plan to provide some safeguards, but there are some issues that need to be resolved. But we have just received, unfortunately, quite a bit of pushback. Really, it started in the House, and so we didn't get a fair chance to really push this in the Senate, even though every single one of our meetings we advocated for the inclusion of the distracted driving provisions back into the transportation budget. It was easy for the Senate to say no. Hey, we're going to handle this as a standalone bill. So it really never got off the ground in the Senate, but we're going to continue to work, continue to have meetings. We do have a good coalition, the 4 Ohio group. It's a group of a few dozen powerful organizations, from the trucking industry to consumer groups to businesses, the insurance industry, and then those who have unfortunately been impacted by distracted driving. So pretty good group of advocates, and we're going to continue to fight to try to get this thing done.
Yeah, and I think part of it was a procedural issue. You've taken this very emotional and heavy weighted issue and putting it into a bill that is basically fast tracked. And so it's difficult to get into the meat and potatoes on what this entails and trying to fix the amendment if the penalties are too stiff for people's comfortability or what that scenario may be. It's difficult to tweak it. It's either all in or all out. And I think we ended up in the all out piece, but definitely, and we've talked about this is for the folks in the trucking industry, this is a workplace safety issue for our drivers. And, that's a number one. And number two, it's a tort reform issue, is that, regardless of fault, when we get into accidents, we're the ones who get sued. And so that is definitely something that we take into consideration is, someone who may be texting and driving and run into one of our trucks, but then they still sue us as somebody who caused the injury. So, and we have to go defend ourselves. And that's the issue, is if we can just prevent it from happening in the first place, as opposed to having to go to court, subpoena, their texting records and hopefully get them to hopefully prove that they were texting and driving while this was going on. That's a lot of onus on the trucking company and our legal teams to be able to get that done. So definitely something that we are going to be advocating for and pushing. I believe that we've got, a pretty good chunk of our legislative piece either off of our plate or pretty well tracked when you talk about the scholarship and loan programs and the tax credits. I think people are starting to see the wisdom of that texting and driving is going to be our number one issue for the next year and a half. So I'm very much looking forward to that. I'm very passionate about that, and I know the industry is as well. So anything else on the legislative front that the viewers should be mindful of?
Everything's going to be dictated by the budget, Tom. I mean, it's going to be a kind of a wild race until the end of June. I would imagine instead of just standalone bills, folks are going to be doing what we're doing, trying to get their bills amended into the main operating budget. So that's going to be key. Hopefully, we'll be able to get some momentum on this, on the distracted driving piece, and get that through to the finish line in the next 3 months. Although that's going to be pretty quick, but going to be a wild 3 months, but we'll get through it.
Well, Andrew, as always, thank you so much for the work that you do on behalf of the industry. It's great to have an advocate like you at the State House every day, making sure that we're not thrown under the bus, for the lack of a better term. So appreciate the work that you've done and the things you've gotten accomplished for us.
No, thank you, Tom. The transportation budget was a great experience, and I think we did an awesome job of just educating legislators about the issues that are important to the industry. Even if they're not in the bill, we made great strides in other areas as well.
I would agree. All righty, Andrew, thank you so much.
Thank you, Tom.